Third time's the charge, Sahadev. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvushavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Turning this down just a bit. You can still hear me? All right. Oops. Rajvajnanat bhati rajjuryathahihi. Rajvajnanat bhati rajjuryathahihi. We're in verse 2. Swatmat jnanat atmano jiva bhavaha. Swatmat jnanat atmano jiva bhavaha. Aptokyahi bhranti nashe sarajjuhu. Aptokyahi bhranti nashe sarajjuhu. Jivo nahan deshikoktya shivoham. Jivo nahan deshikoktya shivoham. Rajju ajnanat bhati rajjuhu yatha ahihi. Due to the ignorance of the rope, the Rajuhu Bhati shines, appears, yatha, just as a snake, ahihi. Swa atma ajnanat, due to the ignorance of one's own self, atmanaha jiva bhavaha, there is the appearance of the atma as an individual. Apta uktya hi bhranti nashe saharajuhu, through the words of a reliable person, he indeed, when there is a bhranti nashe, when there is the destruction of the error due to his words, saharajjuhu, you recognize this as a rope. Jivaha naham deshika uktya, by the statement of the teacher, jivaha naham, I recognize that I am not this individual entity. Shivaha aham, I am indeed Shiva. We've gone through the first three of these padas, and now we're looking at the fourth. Again, we're on verse 2. Jivaha na aham deshika uktya shivaha aham. Deshika ukti taya. Strilinga tritiya vibhakti ekavachanam. Through the ukti, through the words of the deshika. Desha means upadesha, teaching. Deshika is one who teaches. So by the words of the teacher, just as the tenth man was relieved of his sorrow, and just as you were relieved of the fear caused by the projected snake, the recognition of the tenth man was immediate because the tenth man was not away in time or space, and therefore is available for aparoksha jnanam, for immediate direct revelation. And this is how the Shastra works as a pramana, a means of knowledge. Can language give moksha? Can language give immediate recognition of reality? Let me ask this. What did the 10th man in our story need to do to become the 10th man? This is our predicament in an allegorical form or through the illustration. This is a drishtanta for the darshtanta. So we have two things going on. The drishtanta is the illustration, like the story of the 10th man or the rope snake, Rajju Sarpaha, and the darshtanta is the thing being illustrated. So oftentimes we'll just talk about the drishtanta, and it's left to the student to know that when we're talking about the rope snake, we're talking about the Atma and the Jiva. When we're talking about the 10th man, we're talking about you gaining enlightenment through this process of self-inquiry and the revelation that you are even now what you seek to become. So what did our 10th man need to do? And you should hear in your mind, what do I need to do to gain enlightenment? Right? Well, we want to ask ourselves, what is the scope of action? Right? We talked yesterday and earlier today a bit about things you can do to increase your adhikara quotient, your adhikaratvam, your qualification to see this vision clearly and to hold it as your own. Right? There's practices that we talked about. But with the 10th man, what did he need to do, or you need to do if you identify with the 10th man, or woman? I guess we should be gender neutral here, the 10th person. Did he need to, this is the scope of action. And I think Shankara talks about this in his Bhashya, did the 10th man need to gain something? No, he didn't need to gain the 10th man. He was already the 10th man. Apyam, through action you can gain something. Through utpadyam, through action you can create something. Did the 10th man need to create the 10th man? No. Through action, samskaryam, you can clean something. Did the 10th man need to purify himself to become the 10th man? No. Vikaryam, modify. Action can modify something. Did he need to transform into the 10th man? No, he didn't need to any of these. Do any of these apply to the 10th man? No. Do any of these apply to you? No. Jnana is, knowledge is not a function of action. Jnana is a result of a pramana, a means of knowledge. They do apply to the anatma, to the non-self, as we saw, right? You can fix up your character, you can change your mind, you can change your emotions, right? You can promote more tranquility in yourself. But all of those things are transformable. The 10th man didn't need to transform into the 10th man. He needed to recognize a fact. And that's what this teaching is. So, do you need to believe that you are Atma? I once went to I was passing out flyers for Swami Advayatmananda's visit to San Diego. And I don't know what I was thinking. I went to another ashram. And they kindly accepted me and took his flyer. I don't know if they ever posted it. But I sat out of courtesy and listened to the Swami talk. And he was saying, you need to believe you are Brahman. You need to feel like you are Brahman. You need to believe. You only need to believe in something that's not immediately available. You need to understand that you are Brahman, that you are the Sadvastu, that you are Atma. You need to experience Brahman. You need to experience Atma. Atma is never not experienced. Atma is the awareness to which all experiences come to light. Awareness is never away from any experience. The details of any experience changes, but the truth of the experience is an unchanging, awareful being, which you are. And in fact, the 10th man was never not experienced, right? Even in the absence of his knowledge that he was a 10th man, his current experience was fully informed by him being the 10th man. He just failed to recognize that that is what he was. And what separated the 10th man from being the 10th man? Only ignorance, right? And that's our problem. Our problem is fundamentally ignorance. And the curiosity is, the irony is that the very act of seeking, right? So they thought they lost the 10th man. And remember, some of them went up the path, and some of them went down the path, and some went into the bushes and somewhere elsewhere. They were all seeking the 10th man. The very act of seeking denied the presence of that which was sought. They looked everywhere but where the 10th man was, because they assumed the 10th man isn't here, and so they looked everywhere else. So the very act of seeking is premised on the notion that what I'm seeking is somehow away from me. And we're all seeking the beloved. We're all seeking Ishvara. We're all seeking moksha. We're all seeking that at-homeness. It's just that we're seeking it through external means. And that's, you're on the bubble if you think you'll find lasting happiness, contentment, and security by buying a bigger house or a more expensive car or taking longer vacations. Continuing, think my notes have kind of messed up here. Yeah, my notes are sort of messed up here. Anyway. Okay, so at the end of this verse, he says, so jivaha na aham, I am not this jiva. By the words of the Guru, we recognize that we are not this individuated self, but I am Shiva, I am Shiva. So let's go on to the next shloka, which is actually the first shloka, number 1. Naham deho nindriyanyantarangam, Naham deho nindriyanyantarangam, Nahankara pranavargo na buddhihi, Nahankara pranavargo na buddhihi, Dharapatya kshetra vittadi duraha, Dharapatya kshetra vittadi duraha, Sakshi nityah pratyagatma shivoham, Sakshi nityah pratyagatma shivoham. Na aham deha, na indriyani, antarangam, this is the padacheta, na ahankaraha, pranavargaha, na buddhihi, dara apatya kshetra vitta adi duraha is one long word, sakshi nityaha pratyagatma shivaha aham. So when there's adhyasa, when there's confusion, viveka is necessary. Just like in our example of the taptaloha bindavat, like the red hot iron ball. And due to this adhyasa, the superimposition, we mistake ourselves to be samsaris. Some of you have heard of the hridaya granthi, the knot of the heart. Sometimes I mistakenly call it the hridaya grantha, which is the book of the heart. Granth is a churadigana, it's a dhatu, it's a verbal root that actually belongs to the 2nd, the 9th, the bhwadi and the kriyadi gana as well. But when it's used in the 10th gana in a certain way, when it's conjugated in a certain way, it means to bind. And so a grantha is a book because it's bound with string, because back in the day they used palm leaves and they used string to bind the leaves together. And so a granthi is a heart because it's a string that's all bound up. And oftentimes we hear the term avidya kama karma, the hridaya granthi, the knot of the heart. Ignorance, desire, action. A little more elaborate version of that is this. Avidya, ignorance, causes adhyasa. So I take myself to be what I am not. And what I take myself mistakenly to be is imperfect. It's going to die. I'm the body, and therefore I'm going to die. I'm the senses, and therefore I'm blind, and I'm hard of hearing. I'm my memory, and therefore I'm forgetful. Right? I have a bone spur in my heel, and therefore I cannot walk. Right? I'm way too emotional. I have so many negative emotions, and therefore I'm hyper emotional. Right? I don't think clearly, and therefore I don't do mathematics well. And we're all wanting. Right? And so we have this adhyasa. I take myself to be as good as the body, mind, sense complex, what's called the karya karana sankhata. And I find myself to be unacceptable. And then this leads to kama. This leads to desire, because I need to fix myself up. I don't like being imperfect, right? And through shobhana adhyasa is another type of superimposition in which I attribute value where it does not belong. I think money is going to solve my problems. I think a new relationship is going to solve my problems, right? So many things. I think if I gain weight or lose weight, most people say lose weight, will solve all my problems, right? And so we've projected the ability of something external to solve my problems, and therefore I have kama, because I want to gain that thing. And kama is twofold, raga and dvesha. Right? So I want to get the stuff that I think is going to make me happy, and I want to get rid of the stuff that I think is going to make me unhappy. And raga and dvesha lead to karma. Right? So avidya kama karma. And what is karma? There are two actions I can do, types of actions. I can do dharma and adharma. I can do harmonious acts and discordant acts, acts of compassion and selfish acts. And these produce results, drishtapala and adrishtapala. Immediate result, if I do something generous and good, the drishtapala, the immediate result is I feel good, and the person who receives my compassionate act feels good. This is the immediate result. The adrishtapala of dharma is called punya, and it goes into my sanchita karma account, and it will help, it's said in the model of reincarnation and punya and papa, the adrishtapala, these subtle results, will help present advantages and beneficial and pleasant situations in the hereafter and in the next life, and even in this life. If I choose adharma, it'll create papa, and that will do the opposite of that. It'll present problematic situations and uncomfortable situations in the hereafter, in the next life. And this is called karma pala, the results of karma. And these manifest as my next incarnation, right? As the story of my next incarnation. So I may end up being incarnated in an advantageous situation or a challenging, problematic situation. And therefore I find myself wanting still, right? I find myself wanting. There's two meanings of the word wanting. I find myself wanting, meaning I don't have the qualities that I want, and therefore I am wanting, or I want, right? I want to fix myself up. So there's this endless cycle of avidya, adhyasa, kama, karma, karmapala, and this is one presentation of samsara. Endless struggle, endless struggle. Now this verse, the first three lines, the first three padas, are talking about the things which we mistakenly identify with and negating them as myself. So this is analogous to when we counted out the 9 people, right? When the sadhu said, okay, now line everybody up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're trying to find the 10th man. The 10th man is not Parvati, the 10th man is not Shivam, the 10th man is not Joe, the 10th man is not, Sally, right? Neti, 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 neti. To know who you are, you first have to understand who you are not. And so this is a process of negating and trying to remove my identity, to extricate my identity from that which I personally am not. And this is crucial to understand, because if you take yourself to be this limited individual, you'll never understand the Mahavakya Tattvamasi or Aham Brahmasmi. Right? So these are essentially incidental aspects of who I am. They're not essential aspects. And then the fourth line is what the Atma is. It talks about it gives some very nice ideas for what Atma is. Now, so this process is called Atma Anatma Vichara, an inquiry into the self and the not self. I told you that when I first heard Puja Swamiji, he did this analysis in college, when I was in college, and I happened upon a lecture that he was giving. And he started with, there are 2 things in this world, me and everything else, right? And so this process of teaching is called adhyaropa apavada, where a certain context is created deliberately. It's a superimposition, but there's a deliberate provisional context that is created. A duality, me and everything else. And based on that context, I begin my inquiry. And finally, that duality is dismissed. But you have to understand the process of this inquiry, of this investigation. You can't short-circuit the situation. And this needs to become obviously clear, and it takes some time for it to become crystal clear. And this echoes the Adhyasa Bhashya. So I mentioned Shankaracharya. He wrote commentaries on the Brahma Sutra, Trinity Upanishad, and the Bhagavad Gita. His greatest work, his magnum opus, is considered to be the Adhyasa Bhashya, which is the introduction to the Brahma Sutra. Adhyasa Bhashya. He felt the most important thing to talk about was superimposition, as we're talking about now. So we're mainlining Advaita Vedanta here. And he starts off with this very same concept. So please just indulge me. Listen to the Sanskrit. Yushmat asmat pratyaya gocharayoho vishaya vishayanoho tamah prakashavat viruddha swabhavayoho iterator bhava anupapatav siddhayam tad dharmanam api suttaram iterator bhava anupapattihi. That's half of the first sentence. But he gives the same idea here. He said, Yushmat asmat pratyaya gocharayoho. And he used a little different terminology than I'll use here. But he's saying, there's two things in this world. There's the aham pratyaya gochara, aham pratyaya vishaya, and the idam pratyaya gochara, or aham pratyaya vishaya. What does it mean? It's Sanskrit. It means, what is the referent of the I thought? When I say I, what does it refer to? It refers to something. And then there's a referent to the this thought, right? So that's what Pujya Swamiji was saying. When I say I, there's something that points to. And when I say this table, this chair, there's something else. It's a different character. It's of a different character, right? Two things. One thought is this, and one thought is I. Aham pratyaya vishaya, and idam pratyaya vishaya. In Sanskrit, in English, we have two kind of types of pronouns. And a pronoun can stand for anything. Pronoun, sarvanama, can stand for any name, right? In English, this and that. This says it's closer, this table, this chair, and that chair. That means it's farther away. In Sanskrit, there's 4 pronouns, right? Etat, idam, asau, and tat. So anyway, it's very beautiful. But there's 2 things in this world. One is the vishaya vishayanoho. There's the subject and the object. So what we're trying to see is what was actually objectifiable and what is non-objectifiable. The vishaya is the subject, which cannot be objectified, and the vishaya is anything that can be objectified, and that which can be objectified can be referred to as this, and that which cannot be objectified is referred to as aham. Aham means I, right? 2 things, me and everything else. But they are viruddha swabhavas. They have absolutely opposite natures. The vishaya, the subject, is sentient. The vishaya, the object, is insentient. This table is insentient, I am sentient, right? And other characteristics. And they're as different as tamah prakashavat. They're as different as darkness and light, he says. And it's the iterate bhava anupatav siddhayam. When there is the impossibility that these 2 things become one, it's impossible for the rope to become a snake, right? It's absolutely impossible. The snake is a sentient entity. A rope is an insentient entity, right? But they're absolutely different. There's no way a rope can actually become a snake, and yet it's experienced. And even though there's no way a rope, that one can become the other, it's even more improbable that one takes on the qualities of another one, right? It's impossible that fire becomes round and heavy, and a cannonball essentially becomes that whose swabhava, whose nature is heat and light, and yet it's experienced, right? That's what his final part of his final analysis is. It's improbable. It's absolutely impossible. The object of idam pratyaya, of this thought, can never become the meaning of this I thought. And yet we see this adhyasa happens. And so this vichara is meant to analyze that and to see what properly. So we have 2 buckets. We have the this and we have the I bucket. Where do we put stuff of our identity, right? So what we're doing here is operationalizing our viveka shakti. So na aham, this na goes with everything. There's a few nas. Na means no. You may have to supply a couple more. Na aham dehaha indriyani antarangam. So we have this model of how to understand our individuality. And there's a couple different models. Some of you may have heard of the koshas, right? Annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha, anandamaya kosha. It's a model of 5 different points of misidentification. Sometimes these koshas are talked about as sheaths, and you have to remove these sheaths. We don't need to remove these sheaths, the body and the pranas and all that. We just have to reevaluate our identification with them. This is a different model, and it only presents two, that's fine. The Stula Sharira and the Sukshma Sharira. Sharira means the Deha, the body. Stula means gross. And it doesn't mean, ooh, gross, like you'd say in third grade. Gross means perceptible by the senses. Whatever is perceptible by the senses is Stula. Whatever is not perceptible by the senses is called Sukshma, but it's still perceptible by what's called Sakshi Pratyaksha. I still know what's in my mind. I still know what's in my heart. I still know the functioning of my senses. So he first says, Dehaha. Naham Dehaha. I am not this body. Deha means dahana yogya, that which is subject to being burnt, right? You can think of it as think about this, it's a skin bag filled with blood and bone and bile. That's this body. It's useful to think about this as temporary student housing. How is it not me? How can I have the audacity to say this body is not me? There is a radical difference between the drik and the drishya. These are two ways to look at this. There is a complete difference between the knower and the known. I know it's called drik and drishya, the seer and the seen. I know a head of cabbage. A head of cabbage is known to me. I am the knower, and I see the head of cabbage. The drik, the knower, the seer is me, and the head of cabbage, I should have brought a head of cabbage. A head of cabbage is drishya, an object of my cognition. I don't mistake myself to be a head of cabbage, so the Shastra doesn't have to come in and tell me you are not a cabbage, right? How do I know the cabbage? Through my five senses. I can see it, I can hear it if I knock on it, I can eat it and taste it, I can smell it, right? And all my senses, I can touch it. How do I know this body? Only through the five senses. The body is another object in the world. I can see the body, I can hear the body, I can feel the body. The sense of touch goes all over the body. Sometimes, if I wanted to, I could taste the body and smell it sometimes, right? It's another object, physical object in the world. It's one that I happen to have a unique relationship with because I can control it with just my mind. I can't tell a head of cabbage to lift off the floor, off the table, just by my thought. But just with my thought, I can lift my hand, right? I have a unique relationship with this. We call it flying by wire. Right, when you step, in old days, and probably in half of the cars in the world still, when you step on the gas pedal, it's a gas pedal, not an accelerator, and there's a physical cable attached to the throttle of a carburetor, or whatever is used now, and it pumps more gasoline into the system, right? Now, like in the Prius, when I push on the accelerator, there's no direct cable. It's some potentiometer or some resistor. I don't know what electronics. My electronics is a little shaky, and it's just telling the computer to send more energy to the engine, right? And so you're flying it by wire through electronic means. That's how I control this hand. I tell it to make a fist just with my thought. My thought sends these electrical impulses through my nerves, and the muscles contract, right? I am aware of the functioning of this body. And the second idea here, through which I understand that I am not this body, is that I am not that which I possess. I possess a cabbage. I am not that cabbage. I possess this body. Whose body is it? Mama dehaha asti. It's my body. I am not that which I possess. I am not that which I perceive. This body is a idam pratyaya gochara. It is an object of the this thought, not the I thought. I am the subject, this body is the object. With me? Now the rest of this verse, the rest of this line and the next line talk about the sukshma sharira. The sukshma sharira is the subtle body, it's called. It's what inhabits the body. It's called a dehi. It's that which inhabits the deha, the body. It's the closest thing we have to the idea of a soul. It's that which skedaddles. Sorry to throw so much Sanskrit at you. That which skedaddles when one dies. Right? It's the transmigrating being. And it's often presented either in a 17-point form or in a 19-point form. In other words, sometimes it's said to have 17 aspects, sometimes it's said to have 19 aspects. This presents it as an 18, as something that possesses 18 aspects. It all comes out in the wash, right? But there's 5, 5, 5, and then 3 or 4. So there's 5 pranas, 5 karmendriyas, 5 jnanendriyas, buddhi, manas, ahankara, and chittam. We'll be going over these. And so some people have called me a recovering Catholic. I had 12 years of Catholic school, believe it or not. I loved my rosary. I loved doing japa. And Ash Wednesday, sort of like Vibhuti. The theologies are much different, but it's interesting. The prayer I said when I was a youngster. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. What a ghora thought! What a horrific thought to teach a kid, right? If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Where am I? Is he going to leave me behind and take my soul? What's my relationship with the soul? I have a soul. Really? What is your relationship with your soul? Do you possess a soul? No. The soul is the sukshma sharira. We don't use the word soul. But the soul is that which, the sukshma sharira is that which inhabits the body. And so there's one word, indriyani here. Indriyas. There's 10 indriyas. And really there are I/O mechanism. There are input and output mechanism. So the jnanendriyas, jnana means action. So indriya means really capacity, capability. So there's 10 input mechanisms and there's 10 output mechanisms, right? How to receive information, what sensors do we have in our system that allows us to receive information from the system of our environment, and what sort of ability do we have to engage with that, right? And so the 10 senses, the ones we know, shrotra, tvak, chakshur, jihva, and grana. The ears, the skin, the eyes, the tongue, and the nose. Pretty common. We have 10 indriyas also. The 10 senses. It's a bad translation, 10 senses. And if you are a pearl clutcher, do you know what a pearl clutcher is? Someone who is very sensitive and clutches their pearls if they hear something untoward. You may want to close your ears, because the rishis had no problems with the function of the body. And so the 5 karmendriyas, the 5 action, the capacity for action, are vak, speech, pani, hands, pada, feet, payu, and upastha, anus and genitals. Okay, don't think too much about it if you don't want to, right? But this is the functionality part of the functionality of our sukshma sharira. Sort of like a Roomba. You know what a Roomba is? It's an automatic vacuum cleaner. It has these same abilities. It can sense when it has locomotion, so it can walk, and so. It senses when it's getting close to an object, and it stops, and it turns around. It senses when there's a special dirty spot, and it twirls around and focuses on that area. Or like a Tesla. A Tesla can drive itself because it's aware of its environment, and it responds to its environment, right? It has both of these capabilities. It's not sentient, right? It has no awareness there, but it has similar functionality. So how can I say that I'm not the senses, right? So imagine you're looking out through my eyes. I have very bad vision. So now when I'm looking out here, the only thing I see are blobs of color. I see a pink blob there, and I see a blue blob there, and I have no idea if Sahadevan is even back in the control room or not. So I went to the optometrist recently. I went to one optometrist and he said, no, you have a problem with your eyes. You need to go to an ophthalmologist because there's a problem with your eyes. I can't give you a prescription. I went to an ophthalmologist and he said, there's nothing wrong with your eyes, other than the fact, nothing physically wrong, other than you need a prescription. So I went to an optometrist, and do you know what I had to do? There's a machine now that gets you part of the way, but I had to tell her, A or B? A or B? This is a woman who's gone to how many years of college, and I'm the one who has to tell her, which is better, 1 or 2? Which is better, 1 or 2? And she says, your eyes are fine. I just gave you a prescription for 20/20 vision. Why am I the one who has to tell her how my eyes are functioning? Because there's this vision, this hearing. I know the functionality of my eyes. I know the functionality of my ears. The functionality of my eyes is objectifiable to me. Right? It's these eyes. This is the plural. English doesn't have a dual. In Sanskrit, it'd be dual. English only has a singular and a plural. But is this vision, these eyes, these ears, this functionality, that functionality is objectifiable to whom? To the subject. It's a subtle object, but it's the object of my cognition, my hearing. So when I say that this body is a drishya, an object of my cognition, do I include it in the idam pratyaya gochara or the aham pratyaya gochara? Do I include it into the this or the I? I included it in the idam, in the this, because it's objectifiable. Anything that belongs to the idam, when I can say this, really belongs to the jagat, really belongs to the world. This body is another physical object in the physical world. So now there's me plus the physical world, which includes this body. This body is just one object in the world I happen to identify with. So too with the senses. I relegate the body into the jagat. Give it to Bhagavan. Let him take care of my cholesterol. Sorry, dad jokes. And so to the senses. The senses belong to the world. The subtle world, but I relegate them to the world, right? Cognitively. So too, if I have a bone spur and I have trouble to walk, that the ability to walk, the ability to grasp, the ability to speak, those are all karmendriyas. I'm aware if my mouth is functioning or not. Try going to the dentist, getting some Novocaine, and then having a conversation with someone on the phone. You know if it's working or not, because it's objectifiable. The status of my ability to speak, to function, my mouth to function, is a known entity because I am aware. I am the awarer, and it is the awared, to make up some words. So I relegate my karmendriyas or my jnanendriyas to the world. Naham, I am not these. Some of you have heard me talk about this. They've made great strides in prosthetics. It used to just be, you'd have a peg leg, if you were a pirate, if you got your leg amputated. Now they have a mechanical, very high-tech, computer-driven prosthetics, such that they can connect this prosthetic arm to the existing nerves where someone has had their arm amputated, and it's amazing. I heard about this several years ago, and I think they've made all sorts of progress on this as well. Just with the mind, a person can lift the prosthetic arm. Just by thinking it, they can grasp a cup of coffee and not squish it, and they can tell if it's hot or cold. Jnanendriyani tatra asti, santi, right? Santi. Right? The sense of perception is there because they can feel the pressure and they can feel the heat, and I'm able to manipulate the arm and pick it up. Is that prosthetic arm them? Do they say, when they point to a prosthetic arm, do they say aham or idam? Is this the vishaya or the vishayi? Is it the subject or the object? It's this arm. The thing is that they can take it off, unscrew it at night and put it on their bedside table and take it in for lubrication. Right? That is as much them as this is me. It's an object of my cognition that I happen to have. It's a functional object that I happen to have a unique relationship because I want you all to raise your right arm. oh, I guess I have the magic. I thought I was only able to, through my mind, raise my right arm. But apparently if I verbalize it, I can make you all raise your right arm. You know, in the South, we don't have a plural of you, right? Right? You see, or you see, right? Some people think the plural of you is y'all, you all. But in the South, that's actually singular. The plural of you in the South is all y'all. So why don't all y'all come over to my house? Sanskrit, there's singular, dual, and plural. That's why it's more complex in Greek or Latin. Greek and Latin are classical inflected languages where the function of a word changes the meaning of the word. The function that a word serves in a sentence is shown by the way the word changes its ending. That's what a classical inflected language is. And Greek and Latin are very similar to Sanskrit in that respect, but Greek and Latin don't have the dual, and they have fewer vibhaktis. Sanskrit has 7 + 1 vibhaktis, and Latin only has 5. I couldn't find a Sanskrit teacher when I was right out of high school, and I knew I wanted to learn Sanskrit, so I found a Latin teacher instead. Because it gave me the understanding of how a classical language works. Sanskrit's a lot more fun. Antarangam manaha. Right, so now I've relegated the body, the senses, and the karmendriyas and jnanendriyas into the jagat. Antarangam. Here this means manas. Now, the translation that's usually given for manas is mind. It's a pretty rotten translation. You can think of it as the psychological or emotional self, primarily. So the antakarana means the inner instrument, right? And it includes the manas, the buddhi, the ahankara, and the chittam. The manas we'll be talking about that now. But it's fourfold, oftentimes collectively referred to as the antakarana. The antar means inner, karana means instrument. So all of this we're talking about is our instrumentation. Our jivatvam is instrumented by the body. The body we're an instrumented entity, right? The body is an instrument which we can use. The senses are an instrument. The karmendriyas are instruments. The mind is an instrument. It's an antar instrument. It's an inner instrument. The technical definition is sankalpa vikalpatmaka antakarana vritti, or samshayatmaka antakarana vritti. It's a antakarana vritti. It's a vritti. It's a modification of the antakarana of the mind, whose atma, whose nature is sankalpa vikalpa. It means of the nature of vacillation, or samshaya, nature of doubt. One opinion and then another opinion, one opinion and another opinion. So it's defined as the vacillating mind. Did I lock the door or did I not lock the door? Did I turn the oven off or did I not turn the oven off? To be or not to be? But that really doesn't sit well, because in this model of the antakarana, where do the emotions reside? Really, the emotions reside in the manas. And so that's why sometimes I translate the manas as hridaya, as heart. Technically it's not, but most of our problems are not cognitive, they're emotional, right? And so the manas is also considered the seat of emotion. The manas is the accumulator for sensory input. The manas is also responsible for imagination. Manas means imagination in some contexts, but manas is the seat of emotionality. And I think this is sort of more to the point. We have emotions which we call negative and positive, right? In the end, they're just emotions, and they come and go like anything else. Why do we push away negative emotions? When we have a problematic, challenging emotion like anger or sadness, pushing away emotions does not help the healing process, right? We're not pushing away emotions. We're not trying to say, Swamiji said I should not have emotions. This Swamiji didn't say that, right? Emotions come, like Swamiji would say. When I say Swamiji, I mean Puja Swamiji. This Swami infrequently talks about himself in the third person. Don't think too much about that statement. He would often say, anger comes unbidden. It doesn't ask your permission, right? But all of a sudden we're saying, I am angry. I should not be angry. When the should comes out, there's a problem there. It's worth investigating. And so, we don't deny the presence or the validity of emotions. They may have reality. They may be pratipasaka, right? They may be jiva srishti or ishvara srishti, based on ishvara srishti. They may be purely projection, or they may be have some real cause in the world. I met somebody recently here, and we talked, and I asked them for some insight and some advice. And later on, they texted me and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was so forceful. I hope I didn't insult you." And I didn't get that at all. I said, next time you're forceful, raise your fist and wave your arms, because I could not tell that you were being improperly forceful. And they said, "Oh, it must just be my projection," right? This is pratibhasika. This is the kind of projection. So sometimes emotions are just personal imagination, and a lot of causes for problematic emotions are just that. But emotions really should be addressed on their own level. Some people come to spirituality, to swamis, because they have emotional problems. Some swamis can help. But really, this teaching is meant for those who are relatively emotionally healthy. But some of the practices and the attitude with which you see and accept your emotions can be very healing. Just like a broken arm. You think, okay, I'm not my body. This dumb arm is broken. It's not me, I shouldn't address it. No. Right? You need to address it on its own level. And so this analysis is not an attempt to invalidate emotions, right? I have this emotion, and I don't want to have emotions because I transcend emotion. That's not what we're saying. One really needs to acknowledge emotion and work to heal that. Many of us have wounded inner children. And if you know anything about Jungian psychology, there's a very powerful practice of developing an inner dialogue. Because we also have not only these wounded, scared inner children, but then we have the superegos of the critical parents inside of us. And so within our side, we have our own dharmakshetre, kurukshetre, samavetahi utsavaha. They're all doing this, the first verse of the Gita. They're doing battle inside me. And so we have this critical inner parent. Oh, I should have said something differently. I should have done something differently. I shouldn't have done this. I should have done this. You're no good. You're right. And the little kid is going, I'm just a little 6-year-old. I didn't grow up. And so there's a whole process of creating a healthy, caring, safe inner environment, so you can tell the inner voice just to be quiet. Don't worry, I got it. Right. But you have to learn to love yourself, right? Ahimsa means not only non-injury, but compassion. And one has to have compassion not only to others, but for oneself. Because if you don't have compassion for your own folly, you'll never be able to accommodate and have compassion for another's folly, right? We're all imperfect as jivas. You're perfect as Atma, but we'll get there. So the big emotion I have is I feel unacceptable, right? And I need to fix myself up. And when the world fails to conform to my ragas and dveshas, when I'm trying to fix the world up so it can give me a hit of happiness, I become what manifests as anger or sadness, right? And we're familiar with it, with the feeling of an open or closed heart. When the heart feels closed, it's uncomfortable. A negative emotion is uncomfortable, right? We have a constriction of the heart, of the manas. And it feels uncomfortable, sadness and anger and jealousy. You feel small when you feel those things. And they're uncomfortable. We want to get rid of them because they are virodhis. They have a virodha svabhava to our Atma Swarupa. They have a contrary nature to our true nature, right? Your nature is bigness itself. Brahman comes from the word brah, which means unlimited bigness. And so your true nature is bigness itself, limitlessness. And it manifests as a sense of Purnatvam, a fullness. Like Puja Swamiji would give the example that, if you fill a glass with water, you can fill it over the brim, because the tension on the surface of the water can allow the top of the water to sort of stay in the glass, but it goes over the top of over the lip, but it still stays in, right? That's an expression of your Purnatvam, your fullness, which is your true nature. And so when we act from a sense of generosity and bigness and compassion, where even through will, right, if we feel small, I don't want to give, I don't want to share that, that's mine, But if we say, I have a value for being big. I want to grow in the sattva guna. I want to become more saintly because it'll help me understand who I really am. Then even when it hurts, you give. And when you give love, how much love do you surrender? You don't surrender any love, right? And so the more love you give, this is starting to sound like a Beatles song. The more love you give, the more love that's available to you. And you come from a bigger place. You become a bigger person, and a bigger person is more accommodating. And a bigger person approaches the world with equanimity, because there's nothing that the world can do to harm you. Right? You feel invulnerable. When you feel small, and that's actually, they say, that's actually a manifestation of the Anandamaya kosha. I don't think too much about it. But when the manas constricts, you feel small, right? And it's unnatural. It's like a pebble in your shoe. You want to get rid of it. Why do you want to get rid of it? Because being sad and angry are unnatural to us. If Atma Swarupa, if the truth of yourself was sadness and anger, we'd be totally happy being angry and sad. But that ain't true. That is not true. And so it doesn't conform to our true nature. There's something wrong when we're feeling these quote-unquote negative emotions. But in time, if we learn to accept the emotions, then in time, and we see what is this and what is aham. Idam anger, this sadness, right? This jealousy. Is that aham or idam? Is it I or this? It's this. This is a variable like X. It can take on any value. Why? I know my emotions. The emotions are subtle objects, but they come and go. In whose presence do they come and go? They come and go in my presence. I was the one to mark the beginning of anger. I was present to fully experience the anger, and I was the one to mark the going away, right? Of the gamanam of the going of the anger, right? Is it me or is it this? It's anatma. It's not me, right? And it's curious. So I find as I get older, this is TMI, too much information. Sometimes when I see an act of dharma, when I see an act of compassion, when I see an act of somebody being generous, somebody saving a stranded puppy, or somebody doing something beautiful, my heart wells up and tears come to my eyes. I was teaching some classes in Boston a few days ago, and I was talking about something, I forget what, and my tears started coming to my eyes. That is not something a Swami should do. Right? I didn't fall apart. I didn't fall apart crying, but tears welled up in my eyes out of beauty. When I see beauty or compassion, maybe it's an old man thing. I don't know. Now I understand why my grandmother used to cry when she saw us. Maybe it was, oh, you're such an ugly kid. No, I think it was because her heart was open. And so this was the dynamic that happened. I was in front of people teaching. And so my eyes swelled up with tears. I didn't start crying, but my eyes swelled up. The next emotion was embarrassment. Natural, right? And then the next thought was like Mr. Spock. Not Dr. Spock, but Mr. Spock. I said, oh, fascinating. Right? Because they're just bloody. Sorry, someone once told me bloody is improper to say. I shouldn't say that. But it's just a stinking emotion, right? It's a thing that's known to me. Who wants to be emotionless? The last time I saw Puja Swamiji, he was crying. But he was crying out of gratitude. He got wheeled in on a gurney because he couldn't walk, right? When you start to go, your karmendriya start going, your jnanendriya start going, you start losing your ear, your hearing, your ear sight, your prana diminishes. I don't think we've gotten to prana. I haven't gotten to prana yet. But all of those start going, right? And so he was wheeled in on a gurney to have final darshan of Sri Dakshinamurti in the temple. And he was crying. I mean, he said, that which is born inevitably dies, quoting the Gita, and that which dies is eventually reborn. Except for me, I've graduated. That's what he said, right? And then he started saying, all is grace, all is grace, all is grace. It was beautiful. And tears were coming into his eyes, right? So I figure if my guru can cry, I can cry too. But out of joy, out of fullness, out of happy, out of being a 64-year-old man, I guess. So these emotions, are they aham? Naham, this text says. I am not those emotions, regardless of how comfortable or uncomfortable they are. Because why? Because they are my emotions, and I am not that which I possess. It's just a subtle cabbage that's going through my mind or my heart, right? And it's unknown to me. And every thought depends upon me, and I am the constant presence that illumines that changing emotion. This is why ananda is not properly translated as bliss, because bliss is some ecstatic motion, but it's not a static motion. How's that for a clever twist of words? It just turned a phrase I just made up, right? Ecstasy is not static. You are constant. The emotion will change. Right? Even if it's the greatest emotion you've ever had. So all of these are again counting out the anatma. Nahankara prana vargaha na buddhihi. These are all not self. I am not so let's take these in reverse order. The buddhi is the cognitive self compared to the psychological self. Often translated as intellect. Again, it's not a great translation. It's responsible for the process of reasoning, and so we saw, right, the logic anumana gives you indirect knowledge. Parvato vandhiman dhumavatvat yata mahanasam. Right, the fire is on hill because the hill is on fire because I see the smoke, and wherever there's smoke, there's fire, and therefore the hill is on fire. This is anumana, which gives you paroksha jnanam, indirect knowledge. And it happens in the intellect. And therefore, when the Shastra teaches you about the Atma, it must be indirect knowledge. Because just like anumana, like inference, it's indirect. Right? Any intellectual knowledge takes place in the intellect, and the intellect gives you indirect knowledge. Yes? I want to see you going this way. No. Right? In the 10th man, did the 10th man's recognition of himself being the 10th man, was that theoretical knowledge? Was intellectual knowledge? Puja Swamiji would say, what? Is there nasal knowledge? If something is here for the direct recognition, it cannot be indirect knowledge. You may have a knowledge that is not fully developed, right? So here, I dare you. I dare you to have intellectual, theoretical knowledge of my hand. I double dog dare you. I triple dog dare you to have indirect knowledge of my hand, theoretical knowledge of my hand. Was anybody able to do that? No, because it's immediately available for aparoksha jnanam, for direct, unmediated knowledge. And so are you, right? Where does knowledge take place? In the mind. The mind, the buddhi, has direct access to awareness. Because really, any thought is just awareness plus a particular form superimposed upon it. And so the awareness is reflected in the mind, to use a different approach. Awareness is reflected in the mind, awareness is present in the mind, and so the buddhi can have this akhandakara vritti. It says, oh, there's awareness here. That is my true nature. And we'll look into that much more in the coming classes. But it's also, this buddhi is where inquiry takes place. It's a seat of values and knowledge. So when I have a value, it's a seat of will as well. So the charioteer needs to have, in this Vrata Drishtanta, many of you may be familiar with in the Kathopanishad or in the presentation of the Gita-Upadesha, the charioteer needs to have a hand on the reins. The reins are the manas, and the charioteer is the buddhi, right? And so if the charioteer, the driver, has a proper dharmometer, right? An ability to know what is dharmic and adharmic, then the buddhi can control make the decisions, steer the mind. Then the reins of the mind control the horses, and you're on the proper path. It's too much of an example to go into right now, but that's the idea. And so if you have a value that you want to completely express and assimilate, it's the buddhi that says, I have a value for not killing animals. I have the habit of pulling into McDonald's on the way home from work. It may be an act of will to say, when you drive by McDonald's, once you've decided to become a vegetarian, the car automatically, the Tesla in your manas, in your desire system, will automatically try to go into that McDonald's. But if you have a value, this is why you'll stay straight on the road. This is why Puja Swamiji was never fond of telling people what to do. Right? He hears teachers that are filled their lectures with ling lot tavya, imperatives. Do this, don't do this. Do this, don't do this. He would almost never do that because he felt that if he showed you, if he revealed the value of a certain value, then you would understand that and you'd work to express that in your life. There's a beautiful book, Value of Values. If you've not read that, go buy it. Or download it on the app, it's there too. And it takes the 5 verses from the Gita, amanitvam idam vitvam himsak chantararjavam, all of those verses, which I used to chant every day for years, because it's in the morning, it sets you off. It's like, this is the person I want to be today, right? And so he would unfold this unfoldment of those values. In Santa Cruz, where I used to work, and where I used to live, there was a restaurant called McDharma's, instead of McDonald's. And it was a vegetarian restaurant. McDonald's sued them. And so they had to take the Mick off. So now they're just Dharma's restaurant. It's very funny. But lastly, this buddhi is that which provides the framework through which I see myself and how I interpret the world. And again, it allows for the loving reparenting of ourselves. So am I this buddhi? Right? It's a seat of knowledge and ignorance. Am I smart or am I dumb? Neither. Right? The more information I have, the more I know I'm ignorant, because the more information you have, the more you know what you don't know. That's why there will be countless PhD dissertations, because you take a finer and finer knife and you scrape off more and more ignorance and you reveal some vibhuti of Ishvara. Right? All of this whole entire creation is a manifestation of Ishvara's knowledge. And so you uncover a bit of it and you go, wow, what wonder. What a wondrous thing. And then you scrape off some more and scrape off some more, and it's all acharyavat. It's all amazing. So we'll continue with this tomorrow morning's class. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. I've had one student tell me more than once, saying, it's just amazing how Swami Advayatmananda can end the class right on time. He usually tells me that when it's 5-10 minutes after the time the class should be over. But I'll see all y'all tonight for satsang.